Today we will talk about a book that explains human history in a new way. The name of the book is The Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, and its author are Yuval Noah Harari. This book is a journey that takes us to visit thousands of years of human history. In this journey, Harari has seen history from a different perspective when writing Sapiens. We often see history as dates, kings and battles, but Harari has taken a very unique approach to understanding the growth of humans in this book. This book does not just give facts, but also asks deeper questions: how we became such, our thinking, our understanding, and how our world was. Yuval Noah Harari is an Israeli historian and professor who works on the mainly world history and human evolution. He has acquired his doctoral degree from the University of Oxford, and the main focus of his research is how our species, i.e., Homo sapiens, were so fast. Harari's interest is not just in the history, he strives to convince the future and presentation as well. His approach is quite interdisciplinary, in which he uses histories as well as science, philosophy, and sociology. Greenery is also a philosopher with being a historian. He doesn't just focus on our past achievements, but also try to find answers to today's time-challenged questions, as we are happy today as many years ago. Is there real happiness and peace in our lives from technology and science? In order to understand these questions, Greenery lights us on the past. The speciality of Sapiens is that it connects today's present and possible futures to our 70,000-year-old past. Harari talks about three big revolutions in this book: cognitive revolution, agricultural revolution, and scientific revolution. Through these three revolutions, he explains how human beings evolved, how we transformed our world, and how we can make our future by going ahead. This book is therefore as significant because Greenery does not just count the events of history, but try to convince the reason behind those events. As she talks about the cognitive revolution, she explains how language and imagination made us different from the rest of the beings. When she talks about the agricultural revolution, she questions whether farming made human life easier or more difficult. The result of these reasons is the book of a history, as well as a philosophical journey. A large incubation of Greenery is that the complexes make things simple. If you find it difficult to understand human evolution and history, Greenery makes it an English story. You'll find that you're not in a history class, but part of an interesting conversation. Another instant aspect of this book is that it gives us a new insight into your position. Harari says that we have become the king of the Homo sapiens world, but with this we have also made many difficulties for our environment, rest of the souls, and our future. The book doesn't just talk about the past, but also addresses today's world's problems and forces us to think about how we will proceed. If you want to understand the human history from a deeper and a fresh perspective, The Sapiens is a must-read for you. This book of Harari tells you how we've come so far and now where we're going. Let's start with the cognitive revolution. One of the most important chapters of Sapiens is the cognitive revolution. This revolution made Homo sapiens the world's most powerful creature from a common animal. The revolution came from 70,000 to 30,000 years ago, in the period when there were some changes in the minds of humans who were not seen in any other creature before. This change is called Harari cognitive revolution. This means that an evolutionary jump in the power of thinking, imagery, and understanding that makes us different from the rest of the souls. Cognitive revolution means a sudden change in the strength of thinking, understanding, and talking. It was time when humans first shared complex ideas using language. Language was not just a communication tool, but it gave a new power to humans: imagination. The human being could not just think about what is happening around him, but he could also imagine the future, think stories, and create new concepts. It was the beginning of cognitive revolution. As long as this cognitive revolution did not happen, the human being was a common animal that won the same as the rest of the beings. Our way to hunt was not too different from the rest of the animals. But as the cognitive revolution promoted our brain power, we started developing new ideas, tools, and strategies. This gave us an evolutionary edge that did not possess the rest of the beings. Greenery explains that the biggest gift of the cognitive revolution was language. Every animal is communicative in a rough way, but the language of the Homo sapiens was different. We could not just tell the basic needs, we could hear stories. These stories could also be facial and also imaginatives. Humans cultivated abstract things like God, country, and law. All this was just stories, but those stories gave us the power to be one. We could not create civilization without imagery. Harari says that the generalities of humans were that we could collaborate in large groups through our imagery. This cooperation could be on a large scale, while the rest of the creatures were limited to small groups. As there is a limited limit in the groups of seeds or ants, humans could also work with unconscious people through the power of their imagery. How does it happen? Through common stories and belief. We all believed in the same story, like a lord, a king, or a ral. These illustrations were added to us. The social structure of Homo sapiens also changes after a cognitive revolution. The first change was that human beings began to live in large groups. We began to work together with other people when we developed a new way of thinking and communicating. That's why we learned to organize our groups more than the rest of the living beings, all of which are our complexity. Business organization is the result of the cognitive revolution. Harari explains that after a cognitive revolution, the human has a social flexibility which was not near any other creature. Another major change was the development of technology. Cognitive revolution helped humans create new tools. Through the language, human beings brought their ideas to others and then developed new tools and technologies. Examples of the tools of that time include stone tools, controlling fire, and developing weapons first. These things make the human more powerful. The human environment, the world. One of the biggest changes after the cognitive revolution was that humans began to dominate their world. We were dependent on the rest of the animals for our survival before the revolution, but after this we began to control our resources. We find new ways to grow more food and create new weapons for our protection. Greenery gives an interesting example. Compaction between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. Neanderthals were also animals like us, but they were extinct. The network of Homo sapiens became more strong after the cognitive revolution, while the Neanderthals remained limited in small groups. As the result of the lack of resources, the Homo sapiens surveyed more efficiently by using the power of their cooperation and communication and the followings faced with excitation. This was the impact of cognitive revolution. We found an evolutionary advantage on other creatures. Cognitive revolution made us different from the rest of the beings because we made our thinking beyond basic needs. Harari explains that the rest of the animals live according to their basics, just as to find food, protect yourself and promote your spies. But Homo sapiens saw their world in a new way through the power of thinking. If seen at the basic level, the thinking of humans was at a next level in the compression of the rest of the living beings. Humans paved the power to understand the basic rules of their surrounding world. It was not just relayed from the survey, but it was about thinking how new ideas can be created, new concepts can be developed, and how we can control our environment in a new way. That's why we developed civilization, technology, and social structures. Cognitive revolution created human beings the most influential creatures in the world. It gave us the strength to control our resources and transform complex ideas into reality. After the cognitive revolution, human history had another big turning point. The agricultural revolution. It was a revolution that transformed our society, our life, and the whole world. Harari says that since the agricultural revolution, humans changed drastically in their way of life. From the hunter-gatherers who traveled to the jungle, the humans began to be a place beetle and began to grow their own food. But the introduction of this revolution was not so simple. With this transition, humans also faced the new challenge and problems. Agricultural revolution means a period of time when human beings began to settle down in a place instead of finding food in the forest. It began about 10,000 years ago, when people began to understand how trees can be grown and how it is possible to domesticate animals. The human being in the hunter-gatherer life was dependent on nature for his diet. Those who found fruit, nuts, and animals were eaten. But as soon as the idea of farming came out, humans began to control their food. Aggregation meant that humans learned to manipulate his environment for the first time. Now we began to grow the crops on our ground instead of finding food around the forest. Humans learned to plant seeds, water the crop, and harvest. The advantage was that we now had a reliable food source and we didn't have to find food daily. In the hunter-gatherer life, human constantly moves. His life was dependent to how many of the resources are available in an area. When the resources are low, people go to another place. The hunter-gatherer societies were more mobile and smaller. But as the agricultural revolution came, the humans began to settle in one place. The concept of permanent settlement came from the same period. A benefit of farming was that no longer human needs to be replaced repeatedly. Human set the pattern of his life according to the crop cycle. Crops are grown during the harvest season and then collected food for the rest of the year by storing it. It was the first time when the humans began to make a food supplement. Surplus food meant that some people were free to work other than farming, create tools like pottery, or make new enhancements. This resulted in the development of specialization. On this transaction, as well as some drawbacks. In the hunter-gatherer societies, humans lived on a more physically active and diverse diet, but the aggregator limited them to the same place in a spatial diet. Harari says that the agricultural revolution changed the lives of human beings, but everything was not positive. There were some advantages of aggregation, as humans had a chance to build a place base which started developing large towns and villages. When more croppers began to be grown, humans began to have food supplies, which could be stored for the coming tough times. When the food began to be in replies, it was not necessary to form all. For this reason, people began to develop different skills, such as pottery, weaving, metalworking. This led to the development of civilization, but there were also some disadvantages of aggregation that were not in the hunter-gatherer life. When the human being began to settle a place, he began to see his land as an asset. It introduced the property and the concept of wealth. Now people began to fight for the ground and social hierarchy and inequity from the land's denomination. When the human beings began to settle in one place and stayed in large groups, the development of the disease also occurred. The first hunter-gatherer groups were small, in which disease did not spread much, but in the settled societies, people had the domestic animals and living more in one place had a chance to spread the disease. Aggregator limited human diets to spatial croppers. The first humans had a diet divers, fruits, meats, nuts, berries, etc. But in the farming societies, people were dependent on one or two crops, like wheat, barley, or rice. This also triggered the foundational deficiencies. A bold claim of the greenery is that farming was the largest fraud of humanity. It seems strange to hear the statement, as we see the farming today as a large incubation, but greenery urges that the farming put the humus into a trap. The first hunter-gatherers had much freedom. He lived in natural balance with his environment. His diet was diverse and healthy, and his life was more active. But as soon as the humus began farming, he became the land slave. More and more croppers had to work hard to grow. Harari says farming put them into a bicycle of hard labor instead of making humus life easier. The second drawback of farming was social inequality. When the land was concepted, some people had more ground and nothing had at all. Due to this, the gap of rich and poor began in the society. It was not the case in the first hunter-gatherers, but the control of the ground and resources in the farming societies was limited to some people. The life of an average human changed significantly after the agricultural revolution. In the hunter-gatherer life, human beings surveyed in natural environment, but after farming, the life of the human beings began to move around the ground and crops. The first people lived according to their environment, but now their whole focus was on producing their croppings and producing more food. The first humans lived a mobile life, but after the aggregation it became necessary to settle in one place. This led to the development of villages and cities, with which new problems also came, such as property disputes, disease, and inequity. The day of a tactical farmer was rich in hard labor. He had to take care of his crops, watering them, deleting weeds, and then harvesting. All this work was a physical demanding, but the human being had no other option, as he was now a dependent on his crops. In this way, the agricultural revolution changed the lives of human beings. This gave us a chance to be a place, but at the same time put us into a trap in which we were working hard for our resources and faced with new social and health-related projects. The structure of the society of humans was changed after the agricultural revolution, but another major change came when different societies began to interact with each other. This interaction began the process of unifying the human council. Yuval Noah Harari says there were three main factors behind this unification: money, appears, and releasing. Three things have helped to bring together different groups of the society. Harari explains how people living in different parts of the world, who were previously limited in their own small tribes and cultures, began to connect to a global level. When human beings lived in the hunter-gatherer societies, they were the interactions limited. A small group, as well as the intersection, was not accompanied by other groups. But as the human beings began to settle in the farming community, the size of the societies began to grow and the different groups began to come into the interaction of each other. The process of certification begins here. The exchange of trade and resources was also necessary between different societies. The need became the cause of the cultural exchange between the societies. The first people just followed the practice, beliefs, and ideas of their spatial regeneration, but as the intersection grew, cultures and innovations began to spread. People from the world began learning new things from each other. This exchange became the source of the global spread of languages, customs, technologies, and releasing. The role of money was very important in this certification process. Harari says money worked like a common language that could understand all, whether their culture or language is different. When the societies began to trade with each other, a common medium is needed to exchange the value. Here came the concept of money. There was a powerful concept behind money: trust. Greenery explains that money is a thing that trusts all people, without thinking about what culture the front is or which of the background. One of its logical reasons was that money had become part of a universal agreement. The first barter system was used, but there was a problem: the exchange of everything was not directly possible. Money saved this problem. The biggest advantage of money was that it managed to create a common value system between different groups of societies. If a person is from Africa and the other is to trade between Europe, but both. Then money was a medium that could make it possible. Harari says that money is one of the most inclusive systems in the world, as it can be included, whether it is of any regeneration, culture, or release. Along with money, Appiah's role was crucial to unify human beings. Appiah developed the framework of the political unity. When the large empires evolved, they began to integrate the smallest societies inside them. Harari explains that the work of the Appiahs was not just exchanging their power, but they also worked to bring different cultures together. A basic principle behind the development of the empires was that controlling over ground and resources was a primary source of power. Harari gives a breakdown of how the Appiahs used the military strength and strategic planning to control the individual residents. It was a natural progression in which the Appiahs unified people through their territorial expansion. Societies began to come inside a political system as the Appiahs grew up. Humans got the framework of a common legal system, taxation structure, and administration through the Appiahs. The system brought the societies under a common law to promote the certification and integration. The exam you can see in the Roman Empire, with large parts of Europe unified inside a political structure. A third factor with money and empire that helps to unify the societies is the release. Harari says releasing provided an emotional and cultural bond to humans. Reliability beliefs gave people a shared understanding about nature of the world and their existence. People used to justify their actions and connect their lives with a corpus. Harari argues that the impact of releasing was so big that she assembled a moral code between societies. This moral code guides people how to live them, what's right and what's wrong. It became a shared cultural framework that brought under a common belief to the people of different resonances. This bilingual system promoted a universal understanding that connects societies to each other. Harari also explains that the release was based on a mist that guides people, whether it's an expert in reality. But the psychological impact of this mouth was powerful, giving the societies a corpus and unity. Capitalism's rise and global trade growth was a logical step that forms part of the certification process. Harari says that when the societies began to trade their resources, this led to the development of a global economy system. Harari says colonialism was a part of the framework of this global trade and capitalism. European powers established colonies to expand their resource and economy systems, which became the new source of raw materials and trade for them. The rise of the global trade could also be possible because money, empires, and releases had provided a common framework. The trade connected cultures, ideas, and innovations to each other. As a result of increasing the exchange of resources and goods in different resonances, technology and knowledge were also exchanged. It gets to look at the trade routes of the example Silk Road, with a large number of things exchanged from China to Europe, like silk, spices, paper, and more. Harari explains that first principle of capitalism was based on a simple logic, concept of profit and investment. When people began to make profits by investing resources, economy began to develop and fast. Global trade further excelled this process. The cultures and ideas of different residings reached every corner of the world through the Appiahs, trades, and releases. This spread is quite natural as the intersection between the societies began to grow. Greenery explains the logical progression that the development of innovations was a natural ridge of the cultural exchange. When a society adapts to the idea and practice of another society, new innovations and technologies were born. You can see in the development of the printing press with an invention of China to Europe and spread across every corner of the world from there. Money, opiates, and releases brought human beings into a global society framework. He promoted the economic, political, and cultural experiment among people. Harari says that without these things, the globalized society that the world is today is not possible. Money made a common economic language provided. The Appiah gave the political stability and the releaser promoted the emotional and cultural connection. We came around in human history that we call the scientific revolution. It was a turning point that completely changed the way human thinking and understanding the world. Yuval Noah Harari has defined the scientific revolution in the Sapiens as a critical movement that was not just responsible for the development of knowledge, but also to change the perspective of seeing the world of humans. Harari says that the scientific revolution was based on a simple idea: we do not know everything. This idea challenged the old world's beliefs that were based on the mostly reliability and traditional values. Science gave a new way to understand the world. The biggest thing was that during the scientific revolution, humans began to believe that we can increase knowledge and progress through open experiments and observations. First, most people understood every event and thing in the world through religious or divine powers. But with the scientific revolution, humans began to explore the world's phenomenologically and scientifically. The scientific revolution began in Europe in the 16th century, when the people began to qualify the traditional beliefs. Scientists such as Copernicus, Galileo, and Newton showed that what we think about universe could be wrong. Heliocentric theory established that the meaning is not, but at the center of sun universe. It was a revolutionary thought that challenges all the world's bilingual systems. Another instant approach to the scientific revolution beats interconnected of science, technology, and capitalism. These three things support each other and help accelerate progress. Harari says that science and technology had a huge hand in the development of modern capitalism. Science gave rise to new technologies, and technology promoted new products and innovations that helped in advancing capitalism. It is a simple example, Industrial Revolution, which was possible due to machines and psychotropic adjustments. The machines changed the method of production dramatically, making production of more and more goods possible. Developed markets to sell these goods, and this process made capitalism more strong. Harari says that exploration was also a byproduct of science and capitalism. As explorers explored new content and lands, they found new resources and markets. This was started with the exploration's scientific curiosity, but capitalism supported it as new markets meant much profit. Such science and capitalism work like a bicycle that fast-tracks progress. The scientific revolution changed the understanding of the universe and its own existence. Harari explains that the first human being looked at himself at the center of the universe, but science showed us that we are just a small part of this massive universe. When the discoveries began to be, humans began to study their surroundings with psychotropic tools. Subjects such as physics, biology, chemistry, and astronomics explain to us that nature has its own rules that can also be expelled logical lyrics. This understanding shakes the reliance beliefs, which always had to say that everything has an explanation, spiritual or divine. The scientific advancement also gave us the power to control the nature. For exams, the development of medicine increased the life of humans. The first people understood the divine punishment or taxes to diseases, but the science showed that there are biological and environmental regenerations behind diseases that are also possible to cure. It was a paradigm shift that gave control and knowledge sense to humans about their surroundings. This promoted the rational thinking and logical approach in societies. Some of the major advancements of the scientific revolution put a direct impact on the society. A prominent example is the work of Isaac Newton. Newton's laws of motion and theory of gravity revolves not just science, but also engineering and technology. Darwin's theory of evolution pointed out that the human has been evolved through a process and we are interconnected with all living organisms. Darwin's theory gave rise to a moral and reliability debate in societies, as this theory had challenged the traditional beliefs, but this theory in the scientific community excelled the development of biology and genetics. Harari says a large role of science was also in transforming political and economic systems. As science and technology enhanced the military and industrial capacities, well-known powerful nations and peers began to manage their resources in a new way. Development of modern warfare, communication systems, and transportation networks further strengthened the interconnectedness of the world. Greenery also offers a controversial supplement, that science is like a new release. The first man found the response to his question through the release, where we have come from, what is our choice, and what is the structure of the universe. But science has taken this role gradually in his hand. Today, the scientific institutions have become the authority in which people behave in the same way as the first releasers used in the scripture. Science gave rise to a new moral framework that is based on the empirical evidence and logical regeneration. Harari says that as reliability institutions guided the societies to centuries, so today, the scientific institutions give the societies a direction. Universities, research labs, and scientific organizations have become the new centers of authority and trust in the world of today. Harari also explores that science's appeal is that it always promotes progress and improvement. While the release were one focus for the spirit goal, science always gives the sense of human betterment in making the world more good. In this way, science has become a practical release of today's submission, in which we hold faith on natural law and discoveries. Scientific revolution gave rise to a deep shift in human history. It challenged the old beliefs and promoted new principles and ideas that were always logical and evidence-based. Harari says that science did not just give a new method of understanding the world, but gave human beings a new sense of control and understanding on their world. Science and technology linked with growth capitalism and tracked the evolution of societies together. Capitalism is a system of accumulation of today that is laid everywhere. Harari sees capitalism in his book Sapiens not just an economic model, but as a powerful force that deeply shapes the modern society. Capitalism means that the production and distribution of goods and services is in the hands of private individuals and companies, where the profit-making primary is objective. The coming of capitalism brought a new focus in human societies of continuous growth. The first was the priority survival for societies, but capitalism changed the way of living human beings. Now the priority was not just to fulfill the basic needs, but a persistent exemption and wealth accumulation. Capitalism is the largest driving force of the competition. Companies that are more innovative and efficient are successful in the market. This process also shifts the priority of humans. Where the first were the survival and basic needs important, now the focus of people is on wealth, material goods, and more accumulation. Harari says that this shift is not just to the economy but also influences every aspect of the human societies, from how we live to how we think. If viewed as a basic principle, capitalism has an idea simple: market runs from the supply and balance of demand. Harari explains that this principle is based on the above of the human grid and the desire. People are always looking for something new to secure their needs and desires, and market is the same award. This is the fundamental driving force of capitalism. Endless compression. The concept of growth took a major shift in human history. The first human beings lived in a finite world, limited with resources and finite wealth. But after the coming of capitalism, it changed the idea. Now, in human societies, there is a new mantra of infinite growth that always focuses on more production and more compaction. It is a new ideology in which societies and economy can survive without growth. Harari says that this thought inspires every aspect of human life: how we see our work, how we set goals of our life, and how we understand our world. Every human being is working in this economic machine, whether it is producing or consumer. Growth pressure has changed human priority fundamentally. Now people understand the table of happiness to achievements and material success. Greenery links this phenomenon with conjunctivism. Harari, consumerism is called the inevitable result of capitalism. Consumerism means that the societies are based on the idea that people contemplate. We are trained to the consumer. Companies through advertising, marketing, and branding manage our desires and force us to think that our way of happiness goes through buying things as much as possible. You can view mobile phones as a simple example. Companies launch new models every year and we think we must have a latest phone, whether the old phone is working perfect. This is the fundamental principle of the capitalist economy. If people do not buy things, the market will stop. Greenery says the conjugation of our happiness has also been redefined. More and more positions and wealths are linked directly with joy in today's submission, but the studies show that there is no direct relationship between the material wealth and real happiness. Another aspect Greenery highlights: consumerism, exploitation of human desires. Companies and businesses apply the consumer's desires, force them to think they need new and best products, whether they're real needs or not. This is the basic principle of the capitalist economy: to incentivize people to buy. This continuous compression is not just on the individual but also on environmental and global resources. Natural resources are overexploiting as production cycle never stops. Harari says it is a major drawback of the capitalist model. Endless growth is not sustainable and it distorts the world's ecological balance. Greenery points in its analysis that capitalism and consumerism can also be negative on long-term happiness. A lot of well-being and pauses are not always fulfilled. The studies show that the relationship between the wealth and the happiness after a certain point becomes weak. Harari says that the source of real happiness and fulfillment for humans is not external material access, but internal psychological well-being. A simple analogy can be taken to explain this concept: hedonic treadmill. It is said in the analogy that as soon as a person fulfills one of his desires, his happiness increases temporarily, but after some time he paves a new desire to re-explore some level of happiness. In this way, the human beings are stuck in a constant bicycle where they cherish their happiness, but never contemptuously. Harari says that this model of capitalism puts the human into an endless cycle where the setup is never permissible. Capitalism modifies the world, fueled the innovation, and transformed the society, but conjugation with it has deepened the perception of the happiness of humans. Harari says that consumerism has made human beings constantly conjugated and undermine long-term happiness and set effects of humans. The Industrial Revolution was a turning point that deeply transformed the human society. Harari guides itself in his book Sepsis that this revolution was not just a technological shift, but a process in which the way of living human beings, method of working, and the structure of the societies changed fundamentally. The first people were dependent on manual labor and agrarian economy, but after the arrival of Industrial Revolution machines, factories, and large-scale production reified human existence. Industrial Revolution started in the UK in the 18th century. This period has developed machines that replacing manual labor. Advancements like steam engine, textile mills, and coal mines brought a drastic shift in production and transportation. From here, the concept of mass production came out, producing goods in large quantity, in short time, and at low cost. The work people who had done with hands were now making machines and started a new round of economic growth. With this resolution, urbanization also came. The first people lived in rural areas and worked closely with farming, but now people began to move towards cities where they were getting jobs in factories. It was a migration round where people started shifting from rural to urban areas. The way of living human beings changed dramatically. Harari says the Industrial Revolution just changed the production not, but the human labor and work concept. The work of the first people was quite manual, and he worked in his own way. Cultivation, create handicrafts, and fulfill their delights. But the concept of work became mechanized after the arrival of Industrial Revolution. Now the factories began to work, where the machines replaced the human labor and the people began to work in the time shift. This shift brought a logical and social impact for humans. Now people weren't just fulfilling their basics, but they became part of a larger system where a continuous flow of production walked. In this system, the man's role became a cog in the machine, and the revolution took a routine and reductibility in human life. Harari says it became the foundation of transformation modernity. The modernity meant that human lives was now underlying the large-scale systems and industries. There was a great impact of this transformation, alliance, that people began to disconnect emotionally from their work, because the end product of what they were doing is removed from them. The first one craftsman made and sold his product himself, but now he became a part of a larger machine where the final result of his work was not personal to him. Industrial Revolution not only deeply influenced the human societies, but also deepened the environment. Harari emphasizes that this revolution began unprecedented exfoliation of natural resources. Mass extraction of resources such as coal, oil, and minerals began, causing negative impacts on the environment. Earlier economy's dependence was on the largest renewable resources, such as solar energy, wind energy, and biomass. But the industries gave rise to heavy reliance on fossil fuels, which led to pollution and ecological imbalance in environment. Harari says that the nature of the industrial lifestyle of modern humans is the case in which it is conjugated, applied, and reshaped the environment. We are constantly changing the environment around us through machines and factories, but the negative impact of this reshaping is as much as possible. Industrial waste, air pollution, and deforestation have degraded the planet. This industrial model is just ostensible for short-term economy growth, but long-term has become a big risk for environmental sustainability. Greenery points out that human societies began the process of reshaping their surrounding environment since the Industrial Revolution, but the process of reshaping became a self-inflicting trap. Humans are constantly manipulating the world around them through machines, by creating factories, cities, roads, and bridges, but humans in this process were away from their nature. Modern human societies want a comprehensive control of their environment, but this control has now become a heavy burden over humans. Another aspect greenery highlights this reshaping, that we are not only reshaping the physical environment around us, but also ourselves. Human life has become more mechanical after industrialization. Under the machines, schedules, and mass production, people have gone away from their natural instincts and free-spirited nature. Human lives are now structured and mechanized. Industrial Revolution transformed the complex of human society. Harari says this revolution transformed human work, production, and lifestyles. The machines replaced manual labor and put the human societies into structured and predictable systems. This revolution not only reshaped the human work, but also left deep impact on our environment. The process of industrialization is now reshaping the world around us and the humus itself. Greenery warrants that this reshaping process seems to be the symbol of human progress in the short term, but in the long term it is causing an ecological and psychological crisis. Yuval Noah Harari picks up a bold and thought-provoking queen at the end of his book Sepsis, What is the Future of Humanity? Harari says human species' future is in the hands of fields such as biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and genetic engineering, and these technologies give us unprecedented power to control our evolution. But as well as a few significant ethical challenges arise. Harari says Homo sapiens have now reached a point where she is not just the according evolve of nature's rules. The first was the evolution slow and through the natural selection. The one who was able to adapt to the speech environment was surveyed. But now man has started controlling his evolution through science and technology. We are crossing our biological limits. Harari says that in the future we are entering in a round where there is a strong position to transform the Homo sapiens into a new physique. This transformation can be through genetic engineering and cyborg technologies. Humans can now modify their genes, put mechanical parts in their bodies, and merge their intelligence with machine. These changes will not be just an instrumental impression, but can lead to the birth of a new sapphire that is probably quite different from today's Homo sapiens. The development of biotechnology is one of the most exciting and controversial positivity of human evolution in today's time. Harari says we can modify our genes using biotechnology. Now we can control our physical and mental characteristics. In the, for example, future, we can enhance our height, intelligence, memory, and physical strength genetically. But with this genetic enhancement, ethical questions also arise. Will it be accessible for all or just for some elite group? If only rich people will be able to inherit their genes, will one become a genetic divide in which some people will be biologically superior? The second major focus of Harari is on artificial intelligence AI. AI is a technology that allows human intelligence to be replaced by machine. Harari says AI will not just automate the human task, but the boundary between AI and the humans will be blurred. Human minds and machines with AI advancements will begin to have integrations. This is a positivity where humans can create a cybernetic organism by extinguishing their biological brains, which can lead to a new physic evolve as cyborgs. Greenery points out that the evolution was a slow and natural process so far, but now we are accelerating our evolution with our hands. Human beings are now trying to recover biological limits, integrating mechanical and digital components inside the biological organism, and re-engineering genes can become the core of our future space. But this evolutionary leap also has a negative effect, issue of equality and justice. If a few people have access to biotechnology and AI, it will make a dividend cry between a biological elite and a normal humane. That would be a stark difference between a genetically enhanced elite class and a normal Homo sapiens. Harari warns that this dividend can make social inequity even deeper, which threatens to conflict and division and grow in the world. When a person begins to control his evolution, some serious ethical questions are standing. Harari says the direction we are going to take us away from our biological nature. Should we modify ourselves by bypassing nature's natural process? Should we make our humility sacrificial just to be more intelligent or more powerful? And if we replace our bodies and minds from machines, will we still call human? Another instant point of greenery is of control. When we use biotechnology and AI, we also have to think about which technologies should be in hand. Is it right to control governments or private corporations so powerful technologies? If AI or genetic engineering were misused, it may be catastrophe for its conclusion humanity. So Harari takes the question of who will play a role of responsibility and by which limit we should inculcate these technologies in our lives. Harari says that when a person controls his evolution, he finds himself the power to create a new sapphire. But the e-commerce question arises in this process. What is the real meaning of humanity? If we replace our biological nature, will we lose our human sense? Will we remain humans even after the machine is integrated, or we will become post-humans? This is a challenging question that is not an spur symbol. Harari's perspective is that the humanity's future is now in the hands of the elderly. The direction in which we are taking ourselves is an unpressed path where we are creating a new reality by merging our biological and intellectual capacities with machines. Harari says that the future of Homo sapiens will not just be the result of evolution, but will decide on their own hands of humans. Biotechnology and AI's advancements can lead human beings to their limits and we can transform into a new species, but it also comes with transformation, ethical and challenging questions. The message of Harari is simple. The direction in which we will go into the future will be the redeem on our choices and diseases. Yuval Noah Harari does not just explain the history and human evolution in his book Sapiens, but also touch the deeper philosophical queens of human life, happiness, purpose, and Pisces. Harari picks up the question that as much as the progress and technological advancement humanity has taken care of, have we really happy? Are we living more than those ancient humans in today's modern world, who were hunting in the wilderness thousands of years ago and live a simple life? Harari asks this question directly: is the man of life more happy than the old age? Today's modern humans have technology, healthcare, luxury, and comforts that could not even think about thousands of years ago. Despite all this, Harari says that the level of happiness is probably not as big as we understand. The connection of the happiness is not only from the material position, progress, and economic growth if seen from the greenery perspective. Even though modern humans have machines that work easier, there are medications that prevent disease and our communication tools that connect the whole world. But despite that, people feel themselves lonely, stressed, and disconnected. So Harari says that today's man is probably not more happy than the hunter-gatherer of old deposits. The life of those ancient humans was physically challenged. but he was deeply connected with his community and showed him a direct corpus in his survey. Harari also urges that modern humans have to be commended with happiness in the affairs of their experts. Today's man is looking for a lot more money, more coins, more competence, and when our experts don't match reality, dissatisfaction and unhappiness begin to grow. On the other hand, the old-time people had limited resources and limited ambitions to which they were relatively set up in their lives. His life was a corpus simple to support survival and community. But despite the majority of options and resources near modern humans, she often loses her life's corpus. Harari says the releases and mythology in the old time used Pisces and Perips provide to people. Even though she wasn't a storage scientifically accurate, she gave a structured natural that showed a human being a direction of her life. In today's modern world, science and technology have replaced the release, but it doesn't always deliver piling and Perips provide. Science tells us how the world works, but it doesn't tell us what we need to create a corpus of our life. Harari says that today's man has to constrain himself with his pishing and Perips. Our beliefs and values have become a mix in modern societies. Some people find Pisces in the release, in some nationalism, in some careers, and in some personal happiness. But the absence of a universal sense of purpose often puts the modern humans into the existential crisis. Today's man is often confused about what is the real piling of his life. Another interactive of the greenery is that the concept of happiness of the modern human being is itself pragmatic. In today's time, we often connect our happiness with the external achievements, a good job, a big house, a perfect relationship. But Harari says true happiness is probably in the inner things, as contentment, inner grinding, and emotional well-being. Older people did not have such material things, but they had a deep connection with themselves and with their community. In the modern human societies, after the rise of specialty capitalism and consumerism, people often find their happiness in material positions, but greenery says it is an illusion. True happiness, according to Harari, material growth and external success, it is more relayed with mental state and self-awareness. Harari stands out in his book the question of what is the real source of happiness and meaning. Even though we've taken a technological progress, it's hard to understand the corpus and happiness of our life today. If you're looking for a greenery, you're probably an expert, community, and self-awareness that can lead us to the right happiness and meaning, no matter how much we promote. We are now on the last stop of the world of the sepsis, where we saw the whole human history from a new perspective. This book has given us a deep insight to understand the many of human evolutions, the transformation of society and human nature's multiple imports. Yuval Noah Harari showed us on every stage how we came from Homo sepsis to the advanced civilization of today. First of all, we go about the cognitive resolution. Unique abilities like language, imagination, and cooperation gave humans an evolutionary edge due to which we captured the rest of the speech. Through the cognitive revolution, we understood that the complex thinking's introduction was the most. Then we saw how agricultural revolution changed the fundamentally to human societies. The first human beings were hunter-gatherers who lived according to their environment. Cultivating the human beings became a place segregated and started social hierarchies, diggers, and land bonds along with this settlement. Harari called it the largest frost of humanity, as the life of humans probably became more complex and difficult after this transformation. Under the unification of humankind, empire, releasing, and money began to add different societies to a common framework. These things unify human civilization, whether it's through trade or through connection. With the rise of this global system, modern capitalism, colonialism, and global trade took its shape. Scientific revolution explained to us how interconnected web of science, technology, and capitalism changed the whole world. Harari says that science has become a new release of today's time. We started understanding our universe, nature, and ourselves deeper through this resolution. Then we understood the capitalism and consumerism. Capitalism aided the economic growth, the main driver of the society. But Harari says a cultural shift with capitalism came where humans were stuck in the bicycle of continuous growth and consumerism. Humans began to connect their happiness and Pisces with material accessories, which became an endless bicycle. After the Industrial Revolution, human beings changed their environment through machines and technology. Industrialization redesigned lifestyles and production, but also a heavy impact on environmental and resources. The main message of Harari is that human history is a dynamic and complex story in which many things are interconnected: biology, culture, technology, and economy. We've done the progress in our lives with every revolution, but this progress has also come with a challenge. Whether it is an inequity, there is an environmental damage, or there are existential questions associated with happiness and parasites. Harry says we should look at the history through a lens to help us understand the presentation and future. We can better handle our upcoming challenges by understanding the patterns of history. And the most important thing is that being a homeosepsis, we must actively reflect our roles in these shaping the futures. Advancements such as biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and genetic engineering will define the next steps of humanity, and we have to think about how we will play our ethical and parasitic roles in this rapidly changing world.